Hello everyone, this is update for November 27, 2022, day 277 of the war and of the date update. I'm actually covering all of these days that there were no videos, meaning 25th, 26th and 27th, so 3 days. In terms of military situation, there's essentially no changes over this time. We'll do still walk through just to kind of keep us updated and stay on the top of the news. However, I would like to actually switch a little bit more talk about what's going on in China, Taiwan, and basically Asia. So let's actually look at China. So as you've probably all seen, there is a lot of protest against the COVID-19 measures in China. Uh, However, it's the best way to view that is really it's a discontent driven by economic problems that are sort of multiplying and growing in China. And how this is going to be managed by the Chinese leadership remains to be seen, basically. And what's going to happen again remains to be seen. There is this, increasing probability of some sort of civil war, civil conflict in China, and it's not at this point a small one. The important part of situation around China is that there is also continuing U.S. pressure to prevent Chinese manufacturers to enter, let's say, U.S. And this is being done also not only U.S. For example, U.K. is doing something similar. So, for example, U.S. Communication Commission, I think it's actually Federal Communication Commission, basically forbids purchase of communication equipment from a company called Dahua Technology, HAK Vision Technology. They're usually like surveillance cameras, you probably use them, and Hytera Communications. So this is a couple more companies that were blocked from accessing U.S. market, which obviously kills a lot of revenue. And also in terms of internal Chinese kind of like distribution of power or distribution or sort of like leanings within different provinces. The reason I'm showing this map is I mentioned, we spoke about that sort of pro-war wing won in China during this session of Communist Parliament. However, the regions that are sort of pro-trade or soft power sort of takeover of the world are actually Hainan, Hubei, and then Hui. So this is kind of like a stronghold of this of this sort of kind of like this wing of the Chinese sort of power system. And basically, it's not a surprise that this Foxconn factory riots, they're actually happening here, because I believe it's in Hainan. So again, the situation is very sort of similar as in Hainan. There's not much of anything there in terms of economy, and things are getting more sort of difficult, and the result you're getting those riots. So we'll see what happens, how Chinese leadership is going to be able to deal with this situation. This is very interesting development if you compare it with Taiwan, where it actually things are really, how to say, moving in the Chinese sort of favor there. And that's actually, look, there were elections in Taiwan, and essentially the pro-China forces won. So this navy blue color is pro-China support. The green is sort of independent, for pro-independence support. So essentially, as you can see, majority of the country is kind of like of the opinion of, let's say, becoming part of the China. And so, as mentioned before, there won't be strong sort of kind of fight over Taiwan, because it looks like there is not enough support within Taiwan for actually its own independence. This is also means another important point that from the Chinese leadership perspective, there is no point to do sort of military incursion and military conquer of Taiwan, because if you know Sun Tzu strategy, and it means the best is to win the war by not actually fighting, and this really opens up opportunity for China to actually take over Taiwan without actually fighting, because the in 2024 there will be a presidential election in in Taiwan, and there's extremely high probability that all of this sort of nationalist party, Kuomintang basically party, which is navy blue, is going to win during those presidential elections. At that point, Taiwan basically is in the pocket of China, becoming part of China. So this all kind of probably changes this whole dynamic, these elections, where there's a clear, as I said, support for becoming part of China. So China is happy. China doesn't need at this point to do much. At the same time, the problem with China is as I mentioned just a couple minutes before, is internal civil unrest due to declining economic situation, due to real estate bubble popping up, this export economy system also not functioning and really falling apart, extremely high level of indebtedness or leverage in Chinese economy as a whole. So all of that is creating sort of need to redirect all of this negative energy. At the same time, it's very unclear if it will be possible. So again, from Chinese perspective, everything is going extremely well, actually. The question remains in terms of what the situation with the West. And it does look that West is essentially at this point lost. And it will be just these 2 years without actually fight, without war, right? So we spoke about this war and everything, but looks like it's probably not going to happen unless something, I wouldn't call it black swan event, but something unusual happens, but essentially West has lost, and it will be probably these 2 years used to evacuate all of the production facilities from Taiwan. Even if they're not going to be evacuated, they will be obviously sort of will be captured by China as a prize. So and their only sort of exception to this is if there is change of mind in the West and mostly in US to actually fight for Taiwan no matter what. So far it doesn't look like there is that desire. And so this will be sort of quietly sort of lost to China without any fight. So this is sort of probably the most important development about this whole China-Taiwan situation. At the same time, as I said, to recap, China still needs to find sort of outlet for all of that negative internal energy that's building up in Chinese society, to release it, to sort of release valve. And so remains to be seen. Maybe still will be sort of collision regardless, just not even just because Taiwan is sort of like clear, but because there is really need to release all of that negative energy so it doesn't turn into civil war inside of China. Then one more topic related to China. There's new prime minister in Malaysia who is definitely not pro-Chinese. So basically he's sort of more, call it, I wouldn't say against China, but he's definitely not Chinese sort of puppet. He's definitely having interest of Malaysia as a top priority. And the reason I'm saying that is that he's coming from Muslim part of Malaysia. As you know, there is some tension between sort of Muslims in Uyghur region. Let me just go back here. Here, I don't know what's the name of it in Chinese, Xinjiang region, and essentially, so because of this sort of Muslim solidarity, there's definitely no warm feelings towards China from new Malaysian prime minister. So that's kind of like a little bit of a setback for China because Malaysia is important sort of piece in South Eastern Asia. So that's all in terms of sort of general updates and strategic updates. Let's actually move to Ukraine a little bit. Actually, oh sorry, before we discuss Ukraine, let me mention something about Russian oil. So the price for Russian oil to be shipped from Novorossiysk, which is right down here on the Black Sea, just down a little bit, south. There is no, I don't can't show it on the map, but basically the price for Russian crude oil fell to $52 per barrel, which obviously reduces profitability tremendously. As I mentioned, the cost to extract oil in Russia extremely low. It's between $10 to $12 per barrel, so it's still like $40. But Russian state budget was sort of planned assuming $70 per barrel. So right now, as you can imagine, that's a huge difference what Russia is going to get, and that really, if this sort of persists and remains, it probably creates huge blow in the Russian budget, and then obviously that in turn creates huge blow in the Russian state finances, and basically this means that the I would say demise of Russian currency will happen much faster, and that will also lead to economic problems or economic sort of to extend disaster in Russia much sooner than expected, and it's going to be much stronger and much deeper. But remains to be seen. This might be just in preparation for this December 5th, which is almost around the corner. But that's what's going on with the Russian crude oil. Definitely not big problem for the Russian sort of leadership and everything there. Now let's actually switch to Ukraine. So there were no new attacks against their electricity distribution network. At the same time, that essentially electricity distribution network is functioning at this point in, technically we cannot say those are islands, but practically they are nearly islands. And by say I mean that there's still like very thin interconnect exists between the regions, but it's just so thin and throughput is so little that they just basically connected extremely loosely and sort of, as they say, hanging by the thread. So, and another round of attacks will completely will sort of completely finish this situation where everything is going to get separated into islands, and then each island will try to survive on its own. But majority of the country will be completely in darkness. People surviving by using power generators, obviously, like it's not a no brainer. But there is a huge problem with that because it's extremely uneconomical. It's extremely expensive. The expected life of those power generators is obviously not long, and you need to run them essentially full time, non-stop. And so this is going to be a big problem. Basically, totally could spiral into total sort of disaster with many civilian casualties as a result of it. But we'll see what happens. I mean, there's no definitely. I'm not very hope. I'm not. Well, I'll say I'm totally not hopeful that Ukrainian government will be able to do anything meaningful and helpful. Now let's switch to the actually walks through the front line. Let's see what's going on. We'll start from the very north, and then we're gonna move in a clockwise fashion down south. So the situation along the state border is fairly quiet. Is not much going on there. Then let's actually now look at what's going on North Lugansk section of the front line. Things here are more or less the same, sort of mutual exchanges here and near Kuzemivka between Russian and Ukrainian forces that don't lead to anything. So basically, status quo remains here. Again, failed Ukrainian attack attempt to to cut this road, get to the river, get over the river, didn't lead to anything. So at this point, situation is basically gridlock with no chances of success by either party anytime soon. Now let's move to North Luhansk section of the front line. So things here are more or less the same. Wagner mercenaries actively attacking, and I did not forget my promise. So the sort of discussion of the tactical approaches of the Wagner mercenaries, or I would say Wagner group, but because where you will see from that people there are like essentially used as bio robots to great extent in all of these attacks, and so that's gonna come tomorrow. But today the point is Wagner mercenaries continuing their active attacks. They lose a lot, but at the same time, there are heavy losses on Ukrainian side on Ukrainian side as well. So this is basically mutual exchange of lives at high scale. In many ways, this looks totally like World War One at this point, and even the head of the Wagner mercenaries, Evgeny Prigozhin, stated that the goal is not actually capture Bakhmut, but to basically take as many Ukrainian soldiers' lives as possible. And by that, the idea is, okay, we exchange our sort of call it low quality human material for Ukrainian better quality human material, right? And so we exhaust Ukraine, and eventually this is war of attrition. Eventually, we'll win in that way. So this is something that I've been telling from the very beginning. Ukraine has no chance if it tries to play a game of the war of attrition, which Russia realizes that this is what it is, and it's actively playing it. So if this continues, this is strategic dead end and actually disaster and failure for Ukraine. And this is another like a bell for Ukraine, for Ukrainian society, coming from Evgeny Prigozhin, who clearly stating, this is war of attrition, and eventually will bleed you to death. And in the process, we're not going to use our best sort of resources, human resources, but we're going to use our worst. Or at least that's how, I'm not even judging people who are bad or the worst, but that's from his perspective. I'm sort of sharing his point of view, because in my view, there's nothing is sort of conclusive there in terms of who is good and who's bad there. So, but for today, situation remains status quo. No essential changes here, and then south of Bakhmut situation is more or less similar. No essential changes at this point. But again, situation is extremely difficult and bad for Ukrainian side at this point. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. Things here are also very similar to what we've seen all the time. So Russian attacks out of this Pisky salient, out of this called Novobakhmutivka salient, right? It was the goal of outflanking of Avdiivka and forcing withdrawal of Ukrainian troops. So far, no success. Also futile Russian attacks here near Novomikhailivka with again no success there either. So now let's look at this Zaporizhya front line. Things here are still quiet. Russian sources continue reporting that Ukrainian side is accumulating sort of forces and resources in sort of north of Orikhiv. This is this one. When obviously the logic is that they will be sort of from here attack towards, Azov Sea, and essentially cutting Russian forces into two large groups and potentially uh, creating encirclement of this group that's sort of in there, called, I don't know, Tavria region. This used to be called Tavria region and Crimea region. Just as a reminder, the Crimean bridge is still not functioning sort of properly. It's still being repaired, so it looks like the railroad is still not functioning, and there is very limited use of the road part of the bridge. Russian side is actively working on repairing the bridge despite very bad sort of weather and everything, and the expectation that they will finish repairing the road part by sometime in December. I don't want to say early December, probably going to be end of December. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.